Welcome to the Monday night meeting of the Columbia Heights City Council for Monday, February 24th, 2020. Can I have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Briskins.
Here.
Councilmember Williams.
Happy to be here.
Councilmember Immersion.
Here.
Councilmember Novitsky.
Here.
And Mayor Schmidt.
Here. And tonight's invocation is provided by Pastor Drew Salke from our brand new church here in Columbia Heights, Hope Community Church. So, welcome.
Thanks. Thanks for having me here.
Maybe you could tell us where it is, too.
We just started. We're a month old.
Okay.
We're meeting at Highland Elementary School. It's been great. We're happy to be here. Thrilled to be here.
Thank you.
All right. Let's pray. Almighty God, thank you for our city, those who give so much to serve the people of Columbia Heights. And tonight I'd ask that you'd give them the spirit of wisdom, charity, compassion, and justice, that they may faithfully serve our city, and that you may bring peace and great joy to the lives of all of our neighbors. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you're able, please join with us by standing and to say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next item on our agenda is our mission statement. Our mission is to provide the highest quality services. Services will be provided in a fair, respectful, and professional manner that effectively address changing citizen and community needs in a fiscally responsible manner. Next item is the approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda as presented, please?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Immersion, second by Councilmember Novitsky. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. And we have no items under 6, so moving on to the consent agenda. City Manager Kelly, could you go ahead and read those for us?
Thank you. Under the consent agenda, item A is approval of the City Council minutes of February 10th, 2020. Item B is authorization to seek bids for the 2020 miscellaneous concrete replacement and installation project. Item C is resolution 2020-24, declaring the intent to bond for street rehabilitation zone 4A, the Silver Lake Lift Station, and the Silver Lake Park Boat Landing. Item D is acceptance of the MWMO grant agreement and approval of the contract with Stantec. Item E is authorization to purchase the Smith & Loveless pumps for the Silver Lake Lift Station. Item F is the second reading of ordinance number 1660. That ordinance pertains to rezoning of property located at 3989 Central Avenue, 3889 Central Avenue, 961 Gould Avenue, and 950 40th Avenue Northeast from Mixed Use Development District to PUD. And that's Planned Unit Development District number 220-01. Item C is consideration of the attached list of rental housing applications. Item F is approval of the business license applications. And item I is review of the bills totaling $1,080,331.42.
Okay, if there are no questions, can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Biskins, a second by Councilmember Novitsky. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. For the rest of the meeting, I am going to be leaving. I have not been feeling good. I needed to be here for this vote. And our council president, Nick Novitsky, will be taking over. And thank you as we transition into some new leadership here.
Thank you for coming, Mayor.
You're welcome.
Hope you feel better.
Yes.
All right, welcome everyone. Next on the agenda would be the public hearings. The first one is for the plan unit development, and I believe that would be Aaron.
Well, thank you, Acting Mayor Novitsky and members of the council. Aaron Cherpick, Community Development Director, here to discuss Resolution 2020-25, PUD Planned Unit Development District Plan. So a little bit of background about the project. We're located at the intersection of Central Avenue and 40th, the redevelopment site outlined in red on your screen, just to give us a sense of where we're at in the world. The primary project components that are being proposed, it's a vertical mixed-use redevelopment project that includes about a 21,000 square foot city hall, a 3,400 square foot cafe and coffee shop, and 265 market rate residential rental units with high amenities and underground parking. So just to provide context in space to set the tone kind of for the conversation, this is the project. This is a rendering looking northeast, standing at the intersection of Central and Gould. Just would like to light up the City Hall space for everyone's reference, and the cafe coffee shop space as well. So when it comes to land use approvals, there's a bit to unpack here and how we kind of got to this evening and what we're going to address. So as part of the PUD process within the City of Columbia Heights, it requires a text amendment by ordinance to rezone the site. That creates a new PUD district that is specific to that project area that was outlined previously. The underlying zoning of the site as it stands currently today is mixed use. What the PUD allows for is flexibility in development standards that are related, in this case, to parking space dimensions and density. The first reading of the ordinance, as mentioned previously, was February 10th, so the council meeting before this, and the second reading was just passed actually as part of the consent agenda. When we get into the PUD, or Planned Unit Development District Plan, the best way to describe it is to think of a site plan. For any typical case that would be like this outside of a PUD, we would have a site plan review process. Typically for those projects, the formal public hearing is held at the Planning Commission level, and formal in this regard is direct mail notice. So within all of our land use approvals, some call for a direct mail notice for a formal hearing. Again, normally site plan reviews take place at the Planning Commission level. In the case of a PUD, it's at the council level, and that's what we're here tonight to discuss. So it's the Planned Unit Development District Plan, which is exactly the same information and site plan elements that we reviewed on the 10th. So there'll be an abbreviated review of all of those dynamics from an aerial perspective because we have already gone through this process with the council. It just has that distinct requirement of having the formal hearing being at this meeting. And one of the important things and why we differentiate, so within a site plan review at the Planning Commission level, we can apply conditions of approval to that approval process. And this is what we are afforded in the PUD, because we don't want conditions to show up in the ordinance that's actually codified and built into the city's zoning ordinance. We reference the conditions of approval that are part of this site plan because those fall off eventually. So there's no reason to have them embedded in the code. It's a lot to kind of unpack, but it's important to kind of understand how the process has evolved. So with that, I'll just get into the broad overview of kind of the primary elements that make up the plan and the items that are distinct to the PUD component of this project. So just for an aerial perspective, a site plan view of the first floor of the project, city council component outlined in blue. During the subsequent hearings, we spent a lot of time talking about parking because people are interested in knowing how it functions. The yellow outlined area is the city hall parking that would be for daily use of city hall customers and residents. This area outlined in green is actually part of a bigger area in red that is shared between residents of the facility and then employees of the city hall. So we spent a lot of time unpacking this at previous hearings, but one of the bigger components of the project is parking, so it should be given some special consideration. We'll talk about the unit counts or parking stall counts a little bit later when we summarize the PUD components later on in the presentation. Beneath all of this is the first floor that's at grade at Central and 40th, is an underground parking lot that's accessed from a ramp at that first floor, and this would be resident-only parking beneath the building. The parking, as you can see, almost extends to the boundaries of the site or the property lines identified in red. And this will all be covered beneath 6 floors of building. Just quickly, second floor. So on the second floor, there's some of the amenities that are incorporated into the project. The pool deck and the clubhouse and the leasing office is actually at the 1.5 floor. It's hard to kind of differentiate that. But from there, we move through the rest of, or excuse me, wrong direction. The rest of the floors 3 through 6 essentially look like this. Housing all the way up on the remainder of the floors, and there's one item. There's an amenity deck actually on the 6th floor looking out over downtown. So that's the project from a global perspective. When it comes to primary PUD district plan elements, these are the elements where we deviate from the mixed-use base zoning standard, and this matrix or table actually is a representation of what gets recorded in the ordinance to create the PUD district, if you will. So this will actually be in the code. And what it does, it spells out kind of the broad overview of the project, and again, where we have discrepancies between the mixed-use space standard and this PUD development. So right off, we start off with density. The proposed project standard, which would be in the ordinance, is 265 total units. Under the mixed-use development standard, a maximum that would be allowed typically is 66 units. That's a critical flexibility that's been reviewed and approved by the council. What that equates to per acre is 116 max unit density per acre, where the underlying district would allow for 30. During the review at the Planning Commission and at the last council meeting, we talked a lot about density standards as they relate to where we're located within the urban core and on a transit-oriented development corridor, and how these densities that are being proposed in the project are more in alignment with recommended densities from the Metropolitan Council. Building height, there isn't a standard in the mixed-use district, but we codify it and say that it would not exceed 6 stories in this case. Total number of on-site parking stalls. The minimum allowed by code under the mixed-use district for the entire project could be as low as 257. If we applied all of the reductions that are in the underlying mixed-use standard, that would be the total minimum. The project has proposed 340 to be the total minimum that we would accept, and I put 346 in there because that's what's actually been shown on the site plan as proposed. The Planning Commission the council was amenable to a buffer that would allow for construction designed to refine that number potentially downward. So at the end of the day, the minimum total allowable by code could be far lower than what's being proposed across the entire project. Number of compact stalls received a lot of attention. So under current code, there would be an allowed maximum of 138 for this project, which is 40% of total stalls. And we've requested a flexibility, and I should have started by saying flexibilities or deviations are highlighted in red, of 210 maximum allowed compact stalls. As it stands, the plan provides 200 currently. Again, the built-in buffer was to allow for any sort of nuances as it relates to the final construction design. And then we just codify maximum commercial retail to be consistent with the limits of what's being proposed. So 4,500 square feet of commercial and retail, that would be the coffee shop. And then a maximum office area, which would be the city hall, of 21,500. Both of those exceed what's been designed, but provide any sort of movement that might go upward or downward. These are maximums. And when you take this in total, anything that deviates from this approved district plan that now has become an ordinance would require an amendment that would have to go through a PUD amendment process in the future. So if any building height were to increase or changes in parking, it would come back through from this day forward. So with that, there's a lot of other miscellaneous items that are being reviewed right now that go into the site plan that I just wanted to touch on briefly. So utility connections and or relocation, so how we bring sewer, water, electricity, et cetera, into the site, are being designed with a lattice and Dorn at the moment and being overseen by our engineering staff because there's a lot of moving parts there. So that will be a condition of approval actually with this, and all of the conditions are listed in your report, and I'll go through kind of the highlights once we get there. But stormwater grading and drainage, also very fluid at the moment. So project development team is working closely with the watershed district and city engineer to ensure that the stormwater design is appropriate, and that obviously relates to site grading and just overall drainage, meeting those standards. We also have an Anoka County review and process, predominantly as it relates to access off of 40th Avenue because that's a county road, and then a MnDOT review that's also been partially completed, and MnDOT, again, has jurisdiction over Central Avenue as a state highway. So those are kind of the bigger churning site plan engineering items that are taking place in the background that will receive further refinement in the coming months. And with that, I'd just like to highlight some of the conditions that were outlined in your report as probably the most important. So the conditions of approval that relate to this PUD district plan end up being made in reference in our ordinance as a resolution number, so we tie the two together, but we don't put all of these in there. One of them, the property owner and the city will enter into a development contract that governs site improvements, and this will be executed by the property owner and city prior to any building permit. Second, the developer shall provide a financial guarantee in the form of an irrevocable letter of credit for landscaping and other public improvements. That amount is determined by the city engineer. The applicant shall adhere to any requirements made by Anoka County Highway Department. They shall adhere to any requirements made by the Minnesota Department of Transportation. The city engineer, watershed district, and MnDOT shall review and approve the site grading and stormwater management plans. The developer shall enter into a stormwater maintenance and management agreement with the city. The site utility plans are subject to review and final approval by the city engineer and fire chief, and the developer shall pay park dedication fees as outlined in city code. And then finally, the developer will provide record plans or as-built drawings to the city following project completion. That's just an overview of 17 conditions in all, but wanted to, discuss those as they will secure some of these churning items that are related predominantly to site engineering and utility improvements, that they all have a built-in oversight mechanism. And with that, staff doesn't have any further presentation, and we would stand for questions.
I have two questions, but they're for the developer.
Okay.
One, are you going to be controlling any possibility of Airbnb using any of your apartments in your building?
Yeah, we can ask the developer.
Acting Mayor, council members, thank you very much for having me today. My name is Barrett Corwin. I work for Alatus. I'm a development associate. At this time, we do not plan on having any sort of furnished units or anything like that where we would facilitate an Airbnb function in the building. We have done that in other past projects. In Rochester, we're doing it because it makes sense. We're across the street from a hospital, so you got a lot of short-term users. We have not contemplated that at this project yet.
Okay. I was just thinking, since we're close to Northeast and the Arts District in that area, that it might be a possibility. And second, would you consider in the future, I know we don't have anything in writing as far as codes, but at least purchasing a subscription for solar, even though I know you don't want to put them on the buildings, but is it on top of the building, but is that something you could foresee in the future? I know you use a little bit of gas just to keep I always get the
VRF.
VRF, I think it's VRF system going, and that it does reduce the cost of electricity or the heating and cooling, but is it something that you would foresee?
So we, since the 10th, actually went out and found a solar contractor to do a study on the building. The report came back and showed that there could be a solar array built that would create between 125 to 175,000 kilowatt hours per year. Sounds like a substantial amount, but for some context, our 182 unit project in New Hope, which you guys have walked, has no city council, no retail, and that produces or uses, upwards of 2 million kilowatt hours a year. If you extrapolate that, Columbia Heights would use upwards of 3 million. So the 150,000 is barely 5% of our energy consumption. It's our opinion that the more effective way, as you kind of outlined, to have renewable energy feed our VRF and our electric systems would be to utilize the programs that Excel has set forth. And Alatus would absolutely opt into those programs for the common use and the common areas, which we have control over. We would also be very open into looking into a program where we help subsidize residents to do that as well, so that we can achieve a certain percentage of residents that are opting into the program as well. It's something that we care about. It really is. That's why we, spend upwards of $1 million on the VRF to begin with. The VRF system will lower consumption by about 30% on the low side. We've seen that materialize in New Hope. So the overall consumption goes down by a substantial portion. And as you noted, the only gas usage on site is really to heat the room where those machines are sitting, so that when it gets too cold, and I forget the temperature, Chris knows, I forget that every time. When it gets too cold, it creates heat that the VRFs can then extract energy from. We would absolutely opt into the programs, and we would make it available to residents in the city hall, as openly as we could. But like I said, we looked into the solar, and we really feel that the best use of our dollars going forward is for the VRF and using those renewable programs to really make the thing, as close to 100% efficient as we can. And then when we get some renewable grid energy and that small gas usage would also become renewable, and you'd have a completely carbon neutral footprint there.
So how would the small gas become renewable, using a different type?
So if the grid, from my understanding, if the entire grid becomes renewable,
Right.
I believe those would be also using renewable energy sources, or the generators that we use to heat that room would be using renewable energy sources as well.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. Are you good?
I'm good.
Any other questions? No other questions from the council? Open it to the public then. This is a public hearing, so if there's anybody in the audience that has questions or comments, now would be the time. Please fill out a form with your name and address and give it to Nicole.
Dwayne Morrell. Looking at the plan, I can't see the elevators. And is there a walk-up entrance to the building, or is that on 40th? I don't see it.
Yeah. So it's kind of hard to see from plan view, and I can give you a rendering of, I don't have a good rendering of 40th, but elevators, I believe, are these red blocks. Stairwells are the longer rectangle. This is the primary drive-up entrance for any sort of leasing activity, which is actually on Gould.
How about residential use if they ride the bus? How do they get into the building?
Resident access on foot could take place on Gould Avenue. It could also, you want to speak to that on 40th? You want to give us some pointers?
So,
Find a good,
if you get to the street level.
that one?
Yeah, so this is an entrance corridor off 40th that people could walk into. This is a little, what do you call it? It's just a little room, it's a tiny lobby basically, but it's security essentially, so you can't have people walking in. So you've got secured accesses here, another secured access into the actual building, and then a third secured access into the garage. So you can't have people walking in off the street here. As Aaron pointed out, this is the main, driving entrance for residents or rather for leasing activity. So there's just a porte cochere where you can come in and out. But yeah, as far as pedestrian walking from the bus stop, they'll just walk across the street, walk into here. Then you're right into this white space is actually walkable corridor. So you can walk right into this elevator and take it to your unit. And as you go up, as you said, the residential portion is a U-shape this way. So this is a very centrally located elevator to either walk here to your unit or walk here to your unit, because that's how the residential works. I will point out that these are the main elevators. This elevator is it's for city hall use and the use of the coffee shop and for ADA access, so that there's grandmaster staircases here. If you have, if you're in a wheelchair and you need to get up and down these 2 stories, this one actually does go to the top, but it also facilitates the coffee shop and the retail space. Does that make sense?
So the coffee shop is 2-story?
No, the coffee shop is 1 story. It's
Ground floor, the city hall is 2-story?
No, they're essentially 1.5 stories because of the slope of the site. These structures have higher ceilings and are taller, right?
Yeah, I'm Ben Lindow with Doran Architecture, Mayor, council members. And so grade, if you, on 40th right there, by the time you go around to the other corner of the building on the bottom right, grade goes up about 16 full feet. So we've raised the whole building 16 feet up, so that when you're on that bottom right corner, those units, it's very much close to feeling residential and at grade without having a big parking ramp there.
And these being on the lower elevations have higher ceilings.
Correct, yes. So City Hall will have a full, from the bottom of its floor to the top floor, but we still have to design the structure and figure out how deep that is, but that's 16 feet. So it'd have very high ceiling to accommodate, much like the library, I would say. I think that would feel very close to what you have in your library event center room.
So you can almost see here how this green space eats into the building a little bit. You can see it going up. So these are a little bit taller. They're 1.5 stories, which is why it's confusing when Aaron spins through the site plan.
Right, thank you.
And you can see here is a good illustration of the drive-in, right? So if you're coming in and you think you're gonna lease a unit, there will be 2 parking spaces here. You can drive in here, park your car, and there will be parking along Gold for you to park and walk into the leasing office.
Good deal. Thank you.
I have a question for the developer about the Airbnb. If there's going to be any sort of guides on if residents will be limited on renting out their own units, not from the developer, but from residents doing their own Airbnbs, and then also if there's any limitations for long-term guests on the lease.
Mr. Mayor,
Can you,
council members.
limitations, can they sign longer leases? Is that what you're asking?
For like long-term guests, so if you have someone who's not on the lease, but they're just staying, for months, kind of. So that way you're not expecting them with the parking and everything, and then, for, residents to Airbnb their own units, where during like not Super Bowl apparently, but during a football game or basketball or something like that, are they gonna be able to Airbnb their own units? There are some cities that limit that, some buildings limit that, so wondering your thoughts on that?
Let me short circuit, because our code doesn't provide for Airbnb.
And neither does our lease, neither do
Yeah,
our leases.
our code currently requires that if somebody wants to lease a space for any amount of time, they have to go through the full licensing process. And that's not practical if you're just looking to lease it for a day or a couple days.
And I'll just add, we are very cognizant of the impact that has to a community. And our leases do not, both of the scenarios you're describing are subletting. And so our leases do not allow for residents to sublet.
Thank you.
Is that the location where the city council is gonna be located in the future?
That's correct.
Okay, in that case, I have a.
Your name and address,
My name
please,
is
sir.
Robert Kerwin, K-I-R.
Can you hand it to Nicole?
W-I-N. My father's name is Kenneth Kerwin, I'll be referencing him. My father's a law school professor. He's taught for 47 years at William Mitchell. He was justice of the peace of Hilltop. He's also worked at Lindquist and Vedum. He clerked for Justice Sharon of the Minnesota Supreme Court. He has been reviewing some of Mr. Haft's actions and not real impressed. So I'm just gonna say if we're gonna,
Sir,
especially,
sir, does this have to do with this current,
yeah, I was gonna say,
because I don't see,
build as nice of a building as you want, but if you're still not answering your constituents' questions.
okay, but what you're referencing doesn't have to do directly with this,
Yeah.
correct? So what you would want the end of the meeting for the public forum then, not for this time?
I'll come back for that.
Okay.
But anyways, you may have heard Mr. Williams call the whole thing fishy or.
Can we're sticking to this topic right now, sir.
So,
Thank you. Is there anybody else that has questions or comments regarding the current topic? All right, if not, I will close the public hearing then. And can I get a motion, please?
Move to close the public hearing and waive the reading of resolution number 2020-25. There being ample copies available to the public.
Second.
All in
Second.
favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, move to approve the resolution number 2020-25, approving PUD Planned Unit Development District Plan for property located in the city of Columbia Heights, Minnesota, subject to certain conditions of approval.
Second.
It's been motioned in second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 We have to,
Bobby?
okay.
All right, then we'd be on to item B in the public hearings. And that would be Aaron again as well, it looks like.
I'm gonna flip through the sides real quick to get to opening screen. Okay, great. Thank you, Acting Mayor Novitsky, members of the council, Aaron Cherbik. So the item before you, Resolution 2020-26, actually relates to the development project that we were just reviewing. So when the city's EDA purchased that building at 3989 Central Avenue North in July of 2019, with the intent of redeveloping the site, at that time of the acquisition, it was known by the EDA that the rooftop of that building was occupied by active wireless communication antennas that are operated by Sprint and AT&T. Those antennas are covered by a lease agreement that's actually held by a third-party broker that's called Crown Castle. They don't provide telecommunication services, they just broker space. As such, through the acquisition, the EDA succeeded as the lessor in one or more agreements for these rooftop leases. Prior to the EDA's purchase of the building, if we rewind, starting in February of 2019, Crown Castle actually engaged the city in negotiations to relocate these antennas onto city-owned property. The motivation at the time related to repeated break-ins, vandalism, and theft that was occurring at the vacant building, and the fact that that activity was the source of several disruptions in service for the cell carriers. Between the months of February and July of 2019, staff worked with Crown Castle to develop multiple relocation strategies for that equipment onto city-owned property or city-controlled telecommunication assets. So we looked at sites behind the library, sites behind the public safety building, and then other regional assets for telecom across the street. We are in control of a lease on top of the Parkview Villa building, as well as we have a monopole that's owned by Verizon on the Public Works site. So we looked at all of these different relocation strategies with Crown because they had came to the city and said, we need to get off the building. We know it's vacant. We know it's going to be not a long-term viable solution. And we were happy to work with Crown to assist them in finding that solution. However, following the acquisition of the building, negotiations with Crown for that relocation stalled out. They became unwilling to work with the EDA on an expedited relocation strategy. And when it became clear that they weren't going to relocate as a willing partner, staff did work with the city attorney to terminate the lease with Crown Castle per the terms of that contract. Crown countered by saying that our termination was invalid And from that point, staff worked to engage the carriers directly, so AT&T and Sprint, in an effort to expedite their removal. During that time, Crown interfered with staff's efforts as they were cautioning the carriers not to work with the city directly. So without a willing partner to facilitate relocation of these antennas and the need to clear title to the property and provide for removal of the existing building in the coming months, it's clear to staff that a new strategy needs to be explored. And therefore, staff are seeking approval from the council to move forward with a taking of the leasehold interest by eminent domain. To initiate the eminent domain process, the city has to order an appraisal of the current leases and make an offer to Crown Castle to buy out the leases. If these negotiation efforts aren't successful, the city would then move through the legally prescribed condemnation process in the courts. If that process moves to court action, the city would be required to deposit funds into escrow that are equivalent to the appraised value of the lease. Staff has requested quotes and timelines from several firms to complete the lease appraisals. At the time of this report and meeting, no quotes have been received. However, staff believes that it is necessary to move the process forward in light of our redevelopment timeline that is very much in front of us at the moment. And staff would seek authorization to expend up to the $15,000 limit that does not require further approval by the council for a professional service contract for a qualified appraisal firm that could assist us in providing that appraisal. And then from there, we would make an offer to the leaseholder based on that appraisal. And if those negotiations failed, we would proceed with condemnation through the court. And that is a lot to unpack. There's a lot of moving parts, but it's been a very long time in working with this telecom situation, and staff believe that we need to take a more forceful action. We do hold the door open for what could be a successful negotiation that doesn't go to the court. The attorneys representing Crown Castle have recently reached out to the city to request a meeting, which is part of the condemnation process anyway. But we're definitely open to that meeting and willing to facilitate it if they can bring partners to the table that can help make some decisions on a relatively expedited manner. So we're kind of playing two different tracks, both with the same outcome that we're looking for, and hopeful that we can bring a resolution to this sooner rather than later. There are ample opportunities to figure this out. We just haven't had a willing partner. And we're turning the 1-year anniversary on the negotiation process with a company that, again, initiated that with the city to facilitate their desire to relocate off the building. So with that, I would be happy to answer any questions, but we would recommend that the council does approve resolution 2020-26 that would, again, allow staff to secure that appraisal and then move through the process in that strategic order.
Any comments, questions?
Do you have any idea of timelines as far as like when you guys are talking about seeking approval from the council and then so that we can talk to them, meet with them next week, I think is what we're talking about possibly, or meeting, their attorneys, we're going to be meeting with them at some point. Do we have a timeline as far as how much time they're going to be allowed to make a decision before we decide if they don't say no, then we'd go to the condemnation part? Is there?
I would like to defer to
Yeah.
Jim.
Okay.
Yeah, essentially, the thought is now, because we've experienced some frustration with non-responsiveness, and so the intent right now is to proceed with if the council grants permission, to proceed with the process of the condemnation right away. That, of course, that process takes a little time to get into court and get that done. So in the interim, we're certainly willing to entertain any kind of options that are presented. Most of the time, people don't like to get phone calls from attorneys. But on late last week, when our office received the contact from Crown Castle's attorney, local counsel, Actually, we were pretty pleased with that because now that means that it's getting somebody's attention, and that if they're spending money for someone to represent them, that, you know, typically that's when people are ready to get the matter done. Don't know how it's gonna result, but we don't wanna forego the condemnation process at this point for any period of time because of the fact that we've already given them plenty of time.
I agree with the condemnation going forward because they've been given enough time. We've done our due diligence, and if anything, I'd shorten the timelines as short as you can make it because they've had plenty of time to negotiate with the city. And, you know, you guys are a lot more patient than I am as far as this whole process goes, and I understand why we're doing it because we're dealing with attorneys and possibly court cases. So, okay. Thank you.
Your action tonight doesn't guarantee that we have to go through with the condemnation, it just gives us that option.
Right, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with Connie. We've had plenty of time. We have given plenty of options. I appreciate all the staff's time that has gone into looking into the options and making it work. So I much appreciated, but it is time to get it moving forward, and hopefully we can get it done without the worst case scenario. But anything? Want to talk? You want to talk? Okay. And you're good. This is a public hearing, so if there's anybody in the crowd that has questions or concerns on this topic.
Katie Jacobs, 4104 Monroe Street. Just a quick question, how will this impact, or will this impact the timeline for Alatus to move forward with demolition and actually begin that project?
At the moment, there's no anticipated delay. That's why we're trying to get ahead of this process, because the primary concern is making sure that that project stays on track. So we feel that we're still within the realm of all of this coming together with the timing of the project. So.
Anyone else have questions, comments? Okay. I will close the public hearing on this then, and can I get a motion, please?
Move to close the public hearing and waive the reading of resolution number 2020-26. There being ample copies available to the public.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Move to approve resolution number 2020-26 to acquire certain leasehold interests of 3989 Central Avenue Northeast, Columbia Heights by proceedings in eminent domain.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Thank you, Aaron. All right, that will bring us to items for consideration, which we have none, it looks like. So the report of the council, and Connie, would you like to go first?
Sure. Okay, let's see here. Okay, I attended the Sister City meeting. They had a photographer from Polar that did a really great presentation. It was very interesting. I attended the Fridley Environmental Quality and Energy Commission to see how they basically operate more like a sustainability commission, and they've been around for decades, and they're way ahead of us. And it was really interesting to see the topics that they were working on. I also attended the East Metro City Climate Action Conversation, which was Anoka County. It was with people from Anoka County, Ramsey, and Washington. It was quite a big group over at Roseville's library. It was fun to see what other cities have been doing to increase their sustainability and energy efficiency in other cities in the northern and eastern part of the city, or the metro area. I attended the pancake breakfast fundraiser for Hope for Youth Homelessness at First Lutheran Church. It's a great breakfast. It looked like we had a pretty good turnout. I attended the school board meeting work session. I wasn't able to get to their board meeting. They were working on policies spelling out their roles and responsibilities for the liaison. They also were discussing the results of a survey that they did with residents and parents and staff regarding North Park Elementary. Interesting tidbit for those as far as surveys. They said that when they're doing these surveys, these are professional scientific surveys that they do, 40 to 60% of those respondents were using cell phones, which was quite interesting because I always thought it was more landlines. So I attended the swearing-in of our new police officer, Guy Duran. If you see him in your neighborhood, please say hi and welcome him to our community. I attended the Lola Winter Art Exhibit to see paintings of a Columbia Heights resident. And on the way home, it was like, man, I wish we had more exhibits of our local. I can think of 7 artists that live in our community. It would be awesome if we could have galleries or something where we can actually present our local residents' art. I also want to thank everyone who helped to increase our recycling by 3% and reduce our trash by 4% in this city. Thank you very much. And that's it.
Thank you, Connie.
You're welcome.
Anything?
Just went to the swearing in of Guy Duran, our new police officer. I just like to welcome to the Columbia Heights, City of Columbia Heights, and I was at the wrestling match that the Lions Club put on this Saturday. It was a great turnout. I'd like to thank everybody for showing up. That's all I have.
Thank you. I was also at the swearing in for the new officer. It was welcome. It was a good ceremony. And then I had the pleasure of being at the academic night for Columbia Academy, where they honor all the B and A honor roll students. And there were quite a few of them again this year, so good job to the schools, good jobs to the parents that come out and help support the kids. It was well attended, and I look forward to the next one. You're good? All right, anything from our city manager?
Just a few things coming up. The city council will have a goal-setting work session next week on Wednesday from 2:30 to 5:30. There's the blood drive. Police department is having a blood drive this Wednesday, the 26th, from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. There is still time and slots available. If anyone from the community is interested in donating blood, you can check out the police department's Facebook page or their website, and or you can give them a call and they can help you schedule that. There's Chili with a Cop on the 4th as well, and that's from 5:30 to 7 at St. Matthews. And the Lee Carlson Chili Cook-Off is March 6th. That's at the Embassy Suites in Brooklyn Center. We will be participating in that again, the police and fire departments. And then the Fix-It Clinic on the 7th from 10 to 1 at Community Methodist Church. So quite a few good things coming up.
Thank you. And the attorney?
Nothing to report, Mr. Mayor.
Happy to hear. All right. At this time, individuals, well, to be the community forum, at this time, individuals may address the city council about any item not included on the regular agenda. Speakers are requested to come to the podium, sign their name and address on the form for the council secretary record, and limit their comments to 5 minutes. Individuals are asked to state their name for the record. The city council will listen to the brief remarks, ask clarifying questions, and if needed, request staff to follow up or direct the matter to be added to an upcoming agenda. Generally, the city council will not take official action on items raised at the community forum at the meeting in which they are raised. Do we have any?
We do have a couple names. Start with Dwayne Morrell.
Dwayne Morrell. Just from the discussion on the new city council building and the problems you're having with the communications, has anyone looked at relocating that building to 47th and Central?
What building?
The, whatever you're going to call that apartment building?
Not that
It
I'm,
seems to me
not that
that
I'm aware
the
of.
approximate size of the acreages would be the same. And then all of a sudden you solve quite a few problems because you don't have the condemnation or the court proceedings, possibly delaying the whole project.
Oh, I don't think it's going to cause a delay, but we can have staff look into your questions and get back to you on that.
Okay. Also, I've got a question, and I'd like to direct it to Connie, if I may. It's for garbage collection. I'm a single person. I pay apparently on a weekly pickup, but my container doesn't get out for 6 to 8 weeks. So isn't there an adjustment for people like that? The city has to be expanding that way, and you're also trying to promote reduction in trash. So the rates seem to be increasing. I know when Waste Management took over, was it maybe a year or two ago? There was a 15 to 20% increase at the first pickup. And it seems to me that there's got to be an adjustment there. If we're reducing the garbage, their rates can't continue going up, or they do every 2-week pickup. You got to, it seems that you need a different program or an alternative for people like myself.
Maybe Kevin can help me here. I think we have a standard monthly fee that everyone pays depending on the gallon size of your container.
Correct.
I don't believe that we do it, that sounds to me more like something that we would be doing by weight. And we don't at this time have a program where they pick up garbage and weigh it. And Kevin is.
No, Mayor, members of the council, the fee structure for the city of Columbia Heights and how we maintain the low fees that we have, particularly for refuse, are based on single-family pickup and then other types of uses for the residential. So apartments and then the size of trash containers.
Right.
And if we started giving varying pickup from a 1 week to a 6 week to a 10 week, then the cost of that pickup doesn't change. We still need the trucks out there. So then that cost would be passed on to other ratepayers. And I'm sure the council does not want to do that. The cost is based on weekly pickup of a particular size container. What I would recommend to you, if you're only putting it out that infrequently, go to the smallest container that you can, and it's much less expensive. I can tell you, you had a couple other comments in there. The rates only went up 0.5% this year from what the city charges.
I was talking about when they, Waste Management started. It, from, what was it, Allied or the other people? I recognized the increase in the rate. It went from 30-something to 40-something.
And that was necessary, sure.
But that amounted to the 15% or 20% increase.
Correct. Yep.
Okay, and also,
Before you move on, I do want to thank you for reducing your garbage. So there is a 30-gallon, there is a 30-gallon
I mean,
waste
I almost don't
container you
need
can.
any, but I still have to pay the $40 a month, don't I? Or, order?
Well, there's different tier levels of service. Are you aware of the different levels, and do you have, you may be able to reduce
Well, the small
your.
container is not acceptable because you may have something big and it needs to be in a larger container. So it seems that if you vary the pickup, we have the red tanks are every 2 weeks, every other week. So there's got to be an adjustment there someplace. You have to be flexible for the aging population, the declining tossing of garbage. I mean, you've got yourself between a rock and a hard
You
place.
can do like I do. I cut mine up and put as much as I can of whatever I can't fit into my garbage can and then wait till the next week and put the other. So, I mean, there are ways to work with it. But again, thank you for reducing the amount of garbage.
Okay,
So-
also, are there 4 carts available now? The garbage,
60, 90.
recycling, yard waste, and compost?
No, Mayor, members of the council, the organics is with the compost. There's 3 carts available. So the compost would go into the yard waste, along with the
But
organics.
I don't understand the kitchen,
Th-
whatever it
Those
is.
go right in your yard waste.
But the yard waste is only collected from April to November, correct?
But no, if you sign up for compost service, it's collected year-round. You have to actually sign up for that level of service, and then it's collected year-round.
Well, the Waste Management has 3 vehicles. I know I don't see the 3rd vehicle running around the city at all. And that's 2-man. So
Right, if
I
you,
just don't understand the structure, and it seems awkward at best.
so Mayor, members of the council, yard waste is run, and I don't recall the dates, but it's run through, obviously, when grass is growing. So it's spring, summer, and fall. And that gets picked up every week. And then after it freezes and after they're no longer picking up yard waste, then the service goes to every other week. But you do have to sign up for that service. So if you do want to put your organics into the same container, you just have to call the city, and you can get signed up for organics pickup. And then they'll pick up year-round.
Okay, my last suggestion is, I'm not sure what the pumping station is at Silver Lake. What is that about? Is that, my suggestion is that maybe Columbia Heights work with St. Anthony to clean up the Silver Lake. I know that's quite polluted. Silver Lake has been polluted for a long time.
There are changes being made to Silver Lake. If you want, you can add.
The pumping station, Mr. Morrell, is a sanitary sewer lift station that serves part of the community.
okay.
There's no chance
Not
to.
connected to the lake at all?
No.
Okay. Because I know Silver Lake has been taken over by rather large carp. And I know a lake that the DNR seines 2-pound crappie and sunfish out of, and then it's just 2 miles away. And it would seem appropriate to have, if you have a boat launch and a swim beach, that the two communities could combine and clean that lake up, make it much more presentable. Might be something that you can give yourself credit for accomplishing. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, Katie, you're up next.
KT Jacobs, once again, Mayor and Council. I just wanted to, as the chair of the complete count for the Census Committee, wanted to remind everybody that our year is coming, as a count committee, our year is coming to an end, technically as of April 1st, which is 2020 Census Day. The mailings will begin the middle of March, so I want to remind everybody to be expecting those mailings to arrive and to be sure and fill out their census. The library will be available to assist those that have internet needs as well as language, needing additional language access. And I also wanted to mention that I have been made aware that there are residents in the community, as well as myself, receiving text messages and emails that are not coming from the census or demographics. And I want to caution people to be very, very careful. The census is not making phone calls to you right now. They are not sending text messages, nor are they sending emails to residents in a community. If you see any of those items, you need to pop them into your spam folder right away or just disregard them. Please don't do anything with them. Some of them are soliciting information. Some of them that I've seen on my own email address have also been soliciting an opportunity to earn money. And it's not by having a census job. So I want everybody to be aware of that, and please be cautious. And once again, I thank the city for their support and everything that we've been able to do in the past 11 months. Thank you.
Thank you.
Teresa Strike.
Hello, as mentioned, my name is Teresa Strike. I am a resident here in Columbia Heights. I am also a member of our Senate District DFL, and I work on our Communications Committee. As you probably know, our caucuses for all our parties are tomorrow, and we've been hard at work and ran into a little snag last week when we contacted the library about a routine meeting and were told the library had been instructed not to allow meetings by any political groups to use their space. We then had a previously set up appointment removed, it was canceled, and then reinstated. Thankfully, we had actually already moved and found additional space. This was really disturbing to me. I earned my master's in library and information science from University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee in 2003. Libraries are near and dear to my heart. And one of the things we learn when we go through this course is the importance of libraries remaining viewpoint neutral in how they offer their services. That you have to offer them to every group in your community equally, regardless of their affiliation, their beliefs. This is a matter not only of professional ethics, but it is also, in many cases, a legal duty. When a library offers meeting space to public groups, now, libraries are not required to offer meeting spaces, but if they do, it cannot be based in any way on the views of a group. This has been tried in courts many times by groups a lot more controversial than the DFL. And libraries usually find that no matter how outrageous the group, if they are willing to abide by the standards of being open to the public, behave in an appropriate manner for the library, then that group has the right. When something like this happens, it undermines public trust in libraries. And again, I will fully admit I have a library degree. This makes me probably a little biased, but I do consider libraries to be a cornerstone of our society. And seeing them undermined in that way is very bothersome to me. I don't really have the words for how it kind of hits me in the gut as someone who has so much energy towards my library, So I want to encourage the library, the council, I have a copy of the facility policy, and to uphold it, because I don't believe these actions uphold the policy that is in place, which does say the library makes meeting space available to the public regardless of beliefs or affiliations of the individuals or groups requesting their use. We need to communicate these policies clearly, I think, to our community and make it clear the library is for everybody. That's what it's there for. And make sure that's not undermined. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jonathan Raylander.
You actually got it right.
Just took a guess.
That's one of the first. Hello. I won't take up a lot of time because my friend Teresa pretty much covered it. But basically just wanted to say we appreciate the communication that has happened since the reservation was pulled. I've been speaking with Ms. Bourgeois and been able to communicate with her over the last few days and received a bit more of an explanation for what happened. We did receive an apology for having it rescinded, and then unfortunately we already had to make other arrangements before we understood that it was being reinstated. But I do want to thank you for the consideration that was offered after that. What I would like to say, just in addition to what Teresa said, is that again, she referred to some case law, and I just want to reemphasize that portion of it. Libraries are not considered to be endorsing of anything, any groups that use these facilities, any more than they would be considered to be endorsing any of the viewpoints in the books that are on the shelves. This is a matter of equal opportunity. Once the public space has been offered, it is available to everyone, and it, again, I passed on a case specifically, and I'll be passing that on via electronic form, as well as a couple other cases involving where they had to even allow a white supremacist who was asking to use the space to be able to use that space as well, provided that they conformed with the behavioral and rules of the library itself and weren't interfering with that. We've had a very good relationship with the library. We tend to, like Teresa said, look at this as a way of interacting with the community, and in our own way, we've tried to bring the resources of the library to the attention of the public. We consider that just part of our mission as well as just anything else, and we hope to be able to have that continue. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
John Bristow.
Hi, I'm John Bristow. I'm a resident of Columbia Heights and an active Democrat. And this whole thing seems somewhat peculiar to me. It has been presented as the implementation of the existing policy. However, as a practical matter, the policy since before there was dirt has been that we could use it. Suddenly we can't, somehow we're unworthy or something. Perhaps I'm putting that too strongly, but it is peculiar to me. Quite frankly, so far as I know, we're the only political organization that uses it. And this is, in effect, a discrimination against a particular group. And, you know, you might look at it that way and you might not, but it's odd. Now, I realize that it's not on your agenda tonight, and you don't normally act on things that are not on the agenda. However, this differs substantially from most things, you know, like working on budgets and the kind of things that you've dealt with already tonight. And it's my understanding that the policy which the city manager has implemented is pending agreement or disagreement from the city council. And I would suggest that it's very appropriate to go ahead and override this policy tonight. It, for a myriad of reasons, is inappropriate. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr.
Yeah.
Mayor, council members,
Mhm.
could I have a couple minutes? A lot of misinformation out here. When the new library was constructed, the city council, not the city manager, but the city council enacted a policy where we created a limited public forum. And I say that that's a specific legal term. It's not a public forum, it's a limited public forum. We limited that public forum to residents of Columbia Heights because they paid for the library. It's not a county library, it's the residents' library. And we limited it to nonprofit organizations. Residency is not a protected class, nor is business organization a protected class. So we can limit it to those two entities, those two groups. Now, the policy is sound. That's what the policy is. The current city manager didn't make up a policy. It was the policy that's already in place. Apparently, there's been some inability or some not following the policy that was in place, and that's a separate issue.
Agreed.
But the policy in place is valid, it's legal, and it's conforming to all First Amendment rights and non-discrimination rights. The council will revisit that at a work session, I know, because you can open it up to a full public forum if you'd like, but you don't have to. You currently have a limited public forum system. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have one more name, and then you. Oh. Go ahead.
I want to say thank you for that clarification, but I do want to make it clear, I was on the phone when we were told no political groups, and this is where my concern comes from, is that, as you said, there does seem to be some miscommunication. This undermines public faith in our libraries. And as, again, someone with a library degree, that's very concerning to me, so.
Okay, well, the response that you received, and I'm not going to debate about it, but the response you received that we don't allow political groups is correct. The existing policy does not provide that unless there is a Columbia Heights or a Columbia Heights resident that has some affiliation going on with something, or a nonprofit group. If they misinterpreted the policy, that's a different issue than the validity of the policy. And the council can take that issue up and determine whether they want to keep the current policy and better train staff on what that policy means, or whether they want to change that policy and then train staff with what the new policy is.
Okay. Well, I would just say I am a resident of Columbia Heights, so. It does concern me greatly, so.
That I can't do anything about.
All right, Nancy Robinette.
I want to talk about the library. I am Nancy Robinette. I live next door in St. Anthony, and you guys have a great library, much better than ours. And I have used your library for years. I've brought my child over, and we've checked out books from your library. And I've been to a number of different meetings in the library meeting rooms, including DFL meetings. I am a member of SD 41, which is the DFL organization at issue. Several other DFLers from SD 41 have talked to you tonight. In SD 41, I just wanted to clarify, I suspect you all already know this, but our Senate district includes all of Columbia Heights. In fact, Columbia Heights is the largest city in the SD 41B, the southern half of our Senate district. So when I looked at the facility use policy, I thought it just seemed odd that there was suddenly a prohibition of the DFL having various meetings in the library, because it seemed really clear to me in the facility use policy, and I do appreciate Mr. Heft's comments on limited use forums, but it does seem clear that SD 41 is very much a Columbia Heights group of people. It's also people from St. Anthony who come over here, and people from Fridley and people from New Brighton. But our political group is local and has a very large contingent of residents of Columbia Heights. So maybe this is just semantics, but the policy says rooms may be scheduled by Columbia Heights residents or nonprofit groups. And if the DFL party, the Senate district organization, is not held to be a nonprofit, what about all the people in this group that live in Columbia Heights? This is not a outside political organization that's trying to use your library. This is your residents and your next door neighbor residents that have had a very long-term use of the library. So I would just want to encourage the council, as you consider this issue, and I understand it's on your work session agenda for next week, that you think about the exact language of your facility use policy and the fact that the people before you from the DFL who are talking about this and who are concerned about the use are your residents and care very much about this community and want to be part of this community and use this facility, which was built with community taxpayer dollars. Thank you.
Thank you.
KT Jacobs?
Mayor and council, I have a comment and a question. Am I to understand that that policy that's in discussion, does that not also require anybody using the public spaces to, on any promotional material, they have to state that it is not sponsored by or affiliated with the library? Something to that effect, am I correct?
That's the current policy.
That is correct?
Mm-hmm.
So wouldn't that, if that were part of the issue, would that not mitigate some of the impact that the city may have a concern with? If that was followed through, or is that not part of the problem? In other words, any advertising, if I were to use it, any advertising or promotional material, I would have to make a disclaimer statement.
That is in the rules or the policy right now. I will say this is on the next work session. For anybody that has spoke or has opinions, comments, if you can email them to us as well so we can have a record of it in the meeting, that would also be very helpful.
And then the only other comment I would make is because some candidate, if this is going to be an issue that is enforced as it moves forward, because there are candidates and some political groups in this cycle who have been allowed to use the library, I would suggest that it not be, the change not be imposed or enforcing the current policy may be held until after this election cycle so that everybody's on fair footing. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
I'll make this brief. Just want to appreciate the comments that have been made. The establishment, and I just want to address briefly the comments by the city attorney. We respect the fact that an attempt was made to establish a limited public forum. Again, going back to case law here, This is referring from Concerned Women for America Incorporated versus Lafayette County. They said in their decision to uphold the rights of the group, very similar to ourselves, that by opening up in past groups having little to do with the library educational artistic mission in this particular case, had created perhaps unwittingly a public forum from which it could not now restrict access based upon the contents of a group's meeting. That is the principle that we're basically going with, and we're presenting that again for consideration for your workshop. We hope that will be taken into account. I appreciate KT's comments in the meantime, since this is something that had been on the books and hadn't been prohibitive to groups like ourselves, that we would be able to allow to continue to use that at least through the next election, so we can have a little more consideration of the matter before it's applied the way it has been. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Amada Marcus Simula. I wanted to mention on the library topic that that residents, when we go to the library, a lot of people don't know that it's not a county library, it's just our library. And I think to expect residents to make sure that they understand that the Fridley Library in Mississippi is entirely different, has way different policies than what we have, is asking a very interesting question, because people look at the libraries as a place to learn. And I realize that the wording said, you know, that nonprofits couldn't use it, but meanwhile, the exact topic of this, for this actual event was specifically for the DFL caucus.
I'm sorry, but nonprofits were, it's residents and nonprofits were allowed to use it. So you
Residents and
said-
nonprofits were allowed to use it. So saying that the DFL caucus is not following underneath that, besides it being mostly residents that are in the 41B district, also the fact that the whole point of having a caucus training is educational. And it's about learning about how our government works, learning about how the caucus program does work, you know, for how our city works. And so for people to have that chance and say, well, you need to go learn that in Fridley or New Brighton, but we can't provide a space for even though it is a political organization, it is just teaching how the caucus system works and how the training is going to be for the conveners at the caucus. And it was specifically that this specific meeting about education was the one that was canceled on, is denying our residents a place, and not even our residents, people were coming for training from other places too, a place to learn those things. So just want that to be thought about of if it's going to change going further, that the council think about that as well, that it's an educational place. And that also for the library board members, if they are a part of this process at all too. I know they're not here, but the board members that are viewing this later or whatever, so, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sandra Feist, and I'm a resident of 41B. And I think the issue that we see that I guess everyone has kind of said, but I just wanted to make really clear, is that the written policy is what should be enforced, and the written policy does not differentiate between political and non-political nonprofits. And yet we were told that the reason that the DFL meeting was canceled was because they were political. And so the issue is that if the written policy does not say that political organizations, regardless of affiliation, cannot schedule meetings, then the policy is not being followed, and it's not constitutional to differentiate in that way, even if it is a limited public forum. So I just wanted to make that technical point, that that's kind of the main issue. And just a larger point that we don't quite understand how this policy is updated and how it's being enforced, because we're told one thing and yet the written policy, which was dated in 2018, but was emailed out to us today, doesn't seem to differentiate based on political and non-political nonprofit groups. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Was there any more, Nicole? Okay. Anybody else want to speak? Last chance? All right, I will close the community forum part of it then and look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you, everyone.